In Yemen today, Houthi rebels were vowing revenge after the U.S. and Britain bombed multiple sites used by their Iran-backed militia. The Americans struck the Houthis after warning them multiple times to stop firing missiles and attack drones at commercial ships in the Red Sea. There are now growing fears that these strikes on the Houthis could widen the armed conflicts in the Middle East, especially with Iran in the mix. We're joined now by Behnam Ben Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Behnam, thanks for joining us once again here on Centerpoint.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you, and a belated Happy New Year to you and your viewers.
Same to you as well. Thank you for that. Behnam, you've said that the Houthis are more than just a ragtag group, that they have some of the most sophisticated copies or variants of Iranian weapons. Should the U.S. be worried by their threats of revenge that we're hearing today?
Well, they should be worried about their threats of revenge because the Houthis could do one of two things. One is the U.S. is not responsible for any widening of this war. The Houthis are. There is absolutely zero reason for an Iranian terror proxy in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula to be participating in a war that is largely supposed to be between Israel and Hamas, limited to Gaza. This is Iran's attempt to widen the war, so it's certainly not America's. And to that effect, what the Houthis may do is they may resume targeting of shipping with what's left over of the stockpile that the U.S. and the U.K. and others did not successfully destroy, or they could fire more of those surface-to-surface missiles, things they were firing in the past towards Saudi Arabia in an attempt to further widen the war, because there was a report early in December of last year that was talking about Saudi pressure and Saudi pleading to actually get the Houthis, to get the Americans to not kinetically respond or not aggressively respond to the Houthis, which is the exact opposite of the military campaign that they had led for many years and failed to succeed against the Houthis. So they could try to prey upon not just American risk aversion, but Saudi risk aversion.
Okay, so this is Iran's, not the U.S.'s. They didn't start it. So my question to you is, what degree do you see the U.S. getting more involved beyond what happened last night?
Even the response that the U.S. and the U.K. did last night should be considered limited and retaliatory and defensive. If the Houthis are able to at least 24 or 25 times, depending on how you count, try to target international civilian commercial vessels, cargo vessels, in a part of the world where 12 to 15%, but probably higher because of the importance of east-west trades and changing patterns of maritime trade after the Russia war with Ukraine, the Houthis should not be permitted to be able to target this kind of trade. So in essence, I don't think the U.S. is getting overly involved. If anything, my criticism is that it's underly involved. A 1 to 25 response ratio still doesn't look so good.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because the U.S. focused its strikes on ammunition depots rather than killing the Houthi leadership. Will these strikes make a real difference then?
Well, I think there is an answer in between. Not just the Houthi weapons, caches, and ammos, but the materials they use to actually launch these systems. That would be critical. For instance, the transporter erector launchers for the ballistic missiles, the rail launchers for the cruise missiles, and the truck beds and the flatbeds that actually launch multiple drones. This is critical infrastructure that the U.S. should target in the next go-around if the Houthis continue to escalate. And what we need to be able to target this infrastructure is dynamic ISR, dynamic intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So as soon as we see a fire being lit from Yemen towards one of these vessels, to be able to return fire to the point of origin. That's number one. And not just going after Houthi leadership, which may require the U.S. to have more political engagement in the Yemen, but the U.S. should seriously consider not saying anything, but silently taking out what is alleged to be an Iranian spy vessel helping the Houthis with this maritime targeting that has been operating there in the Red Sea for several years now, and since 2023, since last year, has been helping the Houthis strike at commercial vessels. That should not be permitted to be there.
Okay, so then why don't we do this? Why aren't we directly confronting Iran? Because a lot of people in leadership, especially in Congress, they still believe the Houthis won't stop until Iran is stopped. And if we don't stop Iran directly, will Israel?
Well, what you're pointing to is a larger philosophical and policy problem that exists with the Biden administration. They simply see the picture differently, no matter the dissenting views in Congress and also within the analytical and open source community, by the way. The Biden administration continues to disconnecting the dots between the Iranian state patron, which is the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, as well as the terror proxies that exist in all these different geographies, be it Syria, be it Iraq, be it Lebanon, and most importantly now, be it Yemen. So until this philosophy changes and the risk-reward calculus for the Biden administration changes, which is hard for them to do in an election year, by the way, because this is 2024 after all, I don't see the overall odds of actually successfully deterring Iran or any of its terror proxies improving that much. And then as it goes to Israel, it depends a great deal on their appetite and risk tolerance. Right now, not just are they fighting in Gaza in the south, but they have to look to the north, where there's a new normal due to another Iranian terror proxy that is continuing to step up the fight, and that's the threat posed to Israel from Lebanese Hezbollah.